Introduction: the Casanova Killer. He was charming, he could be charismatic, he was handsome in a way that could draw people in. But Paul John Knowles was also a monster. He was a cold-blooded killer. He terrified a nation. He became known as the Casanova Killer. Knowles drifted from town to town, leaving a trail of bodies in his wake. His victims were diverse. They ranged in age and gender. They had little in common except for the misfortune of crossing his path. Their only connection was the terror they must have felt in their final moments. The Casanova Killer's reign of terror was short and brutal. It lasted only a few months in 1974. But in that time, he etched his name in the annals of criminal history. His crimes shocked the nation. They left a permanent scar on the American psyche. Knowles' story is a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath a charming facade. It is a story of unchecked rage and a complete disregard for human life. It is a story that continues to fascinate and horrify even decades later.
Paul John Knowles was born in Florida in 1946. His childhood was far from idyllic. He was abandoned by his mother at a young age. This rejection left an indelible mark on him. It fostered a deep-seated anger and resentment. Knowles' father, unable to care for him, sent him to live with his grandmother. Life with his grandmother was no escape from hardship. She was strict and unforgiving. Knowles often found himself on the wrong side of her discipline. As Knowles grew older, his troubles escalated. He began displaying delinquent behavior. He had run-ins with the law. Petty theft turned into more serious offenses. He spent time in juvenile detention, but these consequences did little to deter his criminal path. Instead, they seemed to solidify his trajectory towards a life of crime. By his teenage years, Knowles was no stranger to the inside of a jail cell. His early experiences with crime foreshadowed the dark path that lay ahead. They hinted at the monster he would become. The seeds of violence had been sown. They were just waiting for the right moment to bloom.
Knowles' early adulthood was a revolving door of prison sentences and brief glimpses of freedom. He cycled through various institutions. Each stint behind bars seemed to harden him further. It pushed him closer to the edge. It was during one such prison sentence that Knowles met a crucial figure in his life, a woman named Angela Kovic. Kovic was visiting another inmate. She was instantly drawn to Knowles' charisma. They began exchanging letters. Their relationship blossomed, despite the prison walls that separated them. Upon his release, Knowles and Kovic reunited. For a brief period, it seemed Knowles might turn his life around. He had someone who believed in him. He had a reason to stay out of trouble, but his criminal impulses proved too strong to resist. Knowles quickly returned to his old ways. He committed a series of robberies. His crimes grew increasingly violent. Kovic, heartbroken and disillusioned, decided to end their relationship. Her rejection was a catalyst for Knowles. It unleashed a fury within him that would have devastating consequences.
In 1974, Knowles embarked on a murderous rampage across America. His killing spree began with the murder of a bartender in Florida. The victim, a young woman, became the first casualty in Knowles' reign of terror. From there, Knowles' crimes escalated rapidly. He preyed on strangers. He targeted acquaintances. No one seemed safe from his indiscriminate violence. He crossed state lines, leaving a trail of bodies in his wake. His victims varied in age, gender, and social background. Knowles often used his charm to disarm his victims. He would gain their trust before turning on them with brutal force. He seemed to derive pleasure from the act of killing. He reveled in the power it gave him. He documented his crimes in meticulous detail in a diary. This diary became a chilling testament to his depravity. As Knowles' body count rose, so did his notoriety. The media dubbed him the Casanova Killer. The nickname, though seemingly innocuous, belied the brutality of his crimes. It also inadvertently glamorized him, much to the dismay of law enforcement.
Knowles was a study in contradictions. He was a chameleon, adapting his approach to fit the situation. He could be charming and persuasive, disarming his victims with a smile or a sob story. Yet beneath this facade lurked a cold-blooded predator, capable of shocking brutality. His methods were as varied as his victims. Some he strangled, others he shot. Some were killed quickly, while others endured prolonged torture. He often stole from his victims, taking their cars, their money, even their identities. He used their credit cards and identification to blend in, to appear normal while living a life fueled by chaos and violence. Despite the randomness of his victims and the seeming lack of a pattern, a chilling thread connected Knowles' crimes: his need for control. He enjoyed the feeling of power that came from dominating his victims, from having their lives in his hands. His crimes were not just about taking lives. They were about exerting his will, about proving his dominance over those he deemed weaker. This need for control extended beyond his victims. He craved notoriety, relishing the fear his crimes instilled. He wanted the world to know his name, to tremble at his deeds. And as his reign of terror continued, the world watched in horror, captivated by the chilling saga of the Casanova Killer.
The names and faces of Knowles' victims stand as a stark reminder of the human cost of his brutality. Each victim had a story, a life cut tragically short. There was Alice Curtis, the kind-hearted grandmother from Florida who offered him a ride, only to become his first victim. There was Lillian and Mylette Anderson, a mother and daughter brutally slain in their own home. Each victim represented a life extinguished, a family torn apart by grief and loss. Their stories, though tragically intertwined with Knowles's, deserve to be remembered, their memories honored. They were not just names on a list, but individuals whose lives were filled with love, laughter, and potential, all extinguished by a single act of senseless violence. The impact of Knowles's crimes extended far beyond the immediate families of his victims. They sent shockwaves through communities, leaving a lingering sense of fear and vulnerability. People became afraid to trust strangers, to offer help, to even answer their doors. The Casanova Killer's rampage was a stark reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of seemingly ordinary individuals, and the devastating consequences that can unfold when that darkness is unleashed.
As Knowles continued his cross-country killing spree, a palpable sense of fear gripped the nation. His crimes, reported in newspapers and on television, became a grim topic of conversation around dinner tables. Parents kept a closer eye on their children. Neighbors looked at each other with suspicion. Law enforcement agencies across the country were working tirelessly to apprehend Knowles. Roadblocks were set up. Wanted posters bearing his face were plastered everywhere. The FBI joined the manhunt, classifying Knowles as a Class 1 priority. The media frenzy surrounding Knowles's crimes only intensified the sense of panic. Every new detail, every gruesome discovery was splashed across front pages and broadcast on evening news. The public's appetite for information was insatiable. The case had all the elements of a macabre spectacle: a charming killer, a cross-country manhunt, and a growing list of victims. The nation was captivated by the case, but also deeply unsettled. The Casanova Killer had exposed a dark underbelly of American society, a lurking potential for violence that shattered the illusion of safety and security.
The manhunt for Paul John Knowles intensified with each passing day. Law enforcement agencies across the country were on high alert. The pressure was mounting. Knowles, sensing the net closing in, grew increasingly desperate. His luck finally ran out in Georgia. A vigilant citizen recognized Knowles from a wanted poster. He alerted the authorities. A tense standoff ensued. Knowles, trapped and out of options, was finally apprehended. Following his arrest, Knowles made a startling decision. He agreed to confess to his crimes. He offered to lead authorities to the burial sites of his victims. He claimed he wanted to provide closure to the families. But many suspected he was simply trying to control the narrative one last time. Knowles's confession was a chilling account of his crimes. He spoke in a matter-of-fact tone. He expressed little remorse. His words sent chills down the spines of even the most seasoned investigators. He seemed to relish recounting the gruesome details.
Knowles's confession was recorded on audio tape. These tapes became a chilling record of a killer's psyche. In a calm, almost detached voice, Knowles recounted the horrifying details of his crimes. He described his victims, their last moments, and the methods he used to end their lives. The tapes revealed a man who was both cunning and callous. Knowles spoke of his crimes with a chilling detachment. He expressed little remorse for his actions. He seemed to view his victims as mere obstacles in his path, objects to be manipulated and discarded at will. The tapes also provided insights into Knowles's psyche. He spoke of his troubled childhood, his resentment towards authority, and his belief that he was above the law. He seemed to see himself as a tragic figure, a victim of circumstance rather than the perpetrator of horrific crimes. The confession tapes became a key piece of evidence in the case against Knowles. They provided prosecutors with a first-hand account of his crimes. They also offered a disturbing glimpse into the mind of a serial killer.
Paul John Knowles met a violent end in December 1974. While being transported by authorities, he attempted to disarm an officer. He was shot and killed during the struggle. His death brought an end to his reign of terror, but it did little to ease the pain and suffering he had inflicted. Knowles's legacy is a complex and disturbing one. He was a charismatic monster who used his charm to disarm his victims. He was a master manipulator who controlled the narrative until the very end. He left behind a trail of broken lives and shattered families. The Casanova Killer's case serves as a reminder of the darkness that can reside within seemingly ordinary individuals. It underscores the importance of vigilance and awareness. It highlights the need for a society that is proactive in addressing issues like childhood trauma and mental health. Though Knowles is gone, the scars of his crimes remain. His story continues to fascinate and horrify. It serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked rage and the devastating consequences of violence.